In this video, I'm going to be reviewing the Ombre Encore yarn from Knitpal. This is available on Amazon. And I teased a short about this several days ago where I said it is a roving yarn, but better. So let's talk about what I mean by that while I give a yarn review. So the basic type of yarns you're going to run into when you're choosing yarn is a roving style yarn, which is this. These are unfinished fibers. Now with acrylic, it's intentionally woven this way to give a look. People who do crafting with it, like felting, they're going to use most likely true wool yarn and not acrylic because it behaves differently in the felting process. But this video is geared more towards the everyday average knitter and crocheter who shops in retail stores, online and in person. All right, other types of yarn are something I think many of us are familiar with, Bernat Maker, which is a chainette style yarn. And if you look closely, I always think of this like a sock. It's just got this weave to it, very smooth. It doesn't split when you're working with it. I also used this style of yarn with my Siren Stitch blanket. This is the, what is it, Karen Rainbow Cakes. And you can see again, it's this chainette stitch yarn. And it has a slight halo effect. Bernat Maker, excuse me, I haven't noticed has a halo effect, but the other chainettes that I used have. And the Ombre Encore yarn is classified as a chainette yarn, but when you look at it, it looks more like a roving yarn. Now, why I say it's roving yarn but better is because if you've never worked with roving yarn, it's a real pill. And that's because while it is incredibly beautiful and it gives such a expensive artisanal look to your finished items, if you've ever seen a roving yarn hat or blankets, they are exquisite. But when you try to frog the yarn, it's going to tangle upon itself because the fibers are loose. They're not contained like you'll see with what you commonly probably have been using, these plied yarns, where the fibers have been woven together to ply together. These are the kind of yarns that you're going to refer to as yarns that are splitting, because as you work them, the plies can become unraveled. Not always, but sometimes it depends on the fiber, how loosely it's woven, the category of yarn that it is. But you might, when you see something being reviewed, it's called splitty, or you're going to say it splits a lot when you're working with. I find that to be the case when I use bamboo and bamboo blended yarns, but I love them, so I deal with it. Now, another thing about roving yarn, so you see this end, how it's just kind of wispy. That's because if you have to frog it and you go to pull it too much, not only will it tangle on itself, it's going to break apart. And I'll demonstrate that with, let me get out my little reserve here. So I have long hair ragdoll cats, and when I brush the body part, I don't use, like the business end. I do save their hair for stuffing projects. This is one of my alternatives to polyfill in my that video that I have about this. And animal hair, since it's used to weave natural yarns, why not use my free and easy cat hair? Now look what happens. This is what happens with roving yarn since it's unspun. As you pull it too hard, it's going to fray apart like that. That's very much the look of this yarn here. I don't know if you can see, my cats are mostly white, so in this white background, but you see how it's just kind of wispy and pulls apart? That's what happens with the roving yarn. All right, so now let's talk about my review of this yarn, because I have worked up a sample. All right, so this is a chunky yarn. It is, I think it says on here, it's the category 5. I don't know if it says in there, but that's what it is. And I haven't worked the same stitch in the roving yarn. Now I use this for my Violet Vibes hat. It's going to be part of a collection. Same stitch, but this is category 4. And then when you see it here with the ombre yarn, they kind of have that similar roving yarn look. Now, when I start pulling out stitches with this yarn, you'll notice this is a knot. It's just pulling out just fine. There's no tangling on itself, none of that. But when I do it with this yarn, let me find my end. Let's see. At some point, I think I made my stitches pretty clean. I'm starting to feel resistance when I'm pulling these because the fibers, the haloing, that's where they're going to start grabbing on each other. Whereas with this yarn, it has almost like a coating to it. It's keeping it really smooth and easy to work with. And then when you wash it, some of that's going to release, the stitches will fill out, and you get this beautiful finished look. Something else about this yarn that's a little different from the other Chainette yarns is the kind of the springy feel that it has. I always call it bouncy because there's other yarns that I use that have almost a spongy feel. So they're really cozy and squishy, which I think is so great for blankets and scarves and shawls during the cold weather. The Bernat Chainette is slightly squishy, but not like this is. This, while it would be a beautiful stitch definition for a blanket, it's really nice for other home decor items like baskets. And because it doesn't halo, I don't think I would like a halo effect on my baskets or pillows at home. I find it really smooth and easy to work with because of that. I don't know if I would say it's coated, but it does feel like it has a coating to protect the fibers from fraying and splitting. So for beginners, I think this is a great yarn. All right, so this is dried after I've given it the hand wash. And I'm happy to say it still has that same kind of squishy, soft, smooth feel. So it's going to maintain that kind of light, bouncy, inviting, cozy feel that you love in a chunkier blanket. It has a nice little subtle sheen that did not go away with the wash. That does happen sometimes with yarns. You see the color is still true, the beautiful gradient. That's something I want to mention about this yarn. Not all gradients are good, but with this yarn, look how beautiful the transitions are. There's no choppiness to it. And that's also something I really like about roving yarns. The way that the yarns take the color, it's so gorgeous. Yeah, I know yellow is probably not everyone's favorite. I like it. I think it's a really cheerful color. But think about this for hats and cowls, like those beautiful chunky cowls, to be a statement piece. And if you make a matching set with something like this, and it's just an accent that you're going to wear for a few hours, why not get yellow? They have a gorgeous fuchsia. They have, for people that like something a little more toned down, they have black with the grays and the whites in it. That would be really striking with a gorgeous stitch as well. There's a beautiful blue, and they do have solid colors. Now, something I want to mention is the weight of this yarn. Okay, so this is very lightweight especially for a chunky yarn. When you're making blankets, if you've never made a chunky blanket, they can get very heavy depending on which yarn you use. Now this would create a lightweight blanket no matter what size you're making because it's so bouncy and airy. Now this is one of my patterns. It's one of my most popular patterns, the Cozy Cabin ribbed chunky blanket. This is a heavy blanket, and because of that, the likelihood that people are going to use the yarn that I'm using for this, I only show it in a very few sizes. I don't show it in the big sizes, like something that would fit a queen bed or a king bed. It would just be so difficult to manage, to launder, all of that. Of course, it's gorgeous, but if you make it in this type of yarn, and I have other yarn options in this pattern that are more lightweight, it's not going to have that weight. You can just throw it around, throw it in the wash, throw it over as a bedspread if you have a very large sofa, because you have a large living room and you like those larger furnitures and you love to give that handmade touch with your beautiful crochet blankets or knit blankets if you're a knitter. This is a really nice option for that. And it comes in quite a few colors. I'll put some up on screen, and of course I'm going to link it in the description and you can look at it for yourself. Right now I want to work some stitches with you and show you how easy it is to work with this yarn. So like I mentioned, I think I mentioned earlier that I used plastic with this, a plastic hook. This is clover. I'm sure a lot of you have this. This is a 7mm. You could even go up to an 8 depending on the stitch that you're using. Of course, with chunky yarn, you always want to do a swatch and check how much drape you're getting out of something. And with this one, having this kind of that squishy, almost, I don't think spongy is the right word, but that's kind of what I mean. If you don't have enough of a loose kind of a gauge with it, you're not going to get that drape. It'll just kind of float over things instead of settle in to the little, the little nooks and crannies of our bodies when we're using it for blankets and then for our hats and scarves. So for this, this stitch repeat, I think this is a 4-row repeat I'm working on. I used a 7mm, and you see it's kind of open. Got kind of an open weave to it, and there's enough drape to it, but I think for tighter stitches that don't have these chain spaces, you see me working chain spaces, I would probably go up to 8 or even a 9. And on the package, or on the label rather, it's recommending for crochet, so I can knit, I just don't knit that much. It's saying 6.5 to 9mm. I do have 9 and 10mm hooks. I just think 6.5 would be really tight. Can't imagine what you would make with this with a 6.5mm hook. All right, so I'm gonna keep working. All right, that is my review for this yarn. I like it. And like with most yarns, your project will determine the yarn that you use. And in this case, I was inspired by the yarn rather than the project. And once I got it, I wanted to wait and see what I would want to make with it after I got it, because it's so hard when you're shopping online. And with Joann closing here in America, I wanted to look at some online options. So I'm going to be doing reviews here and there the rest of this year with some online yarns. It's just to help you have more options and not have to spend your money until you know what it's going to behave like for practical purposes. It's just so hard to tell. All right, give this video a like if you found it helpful. And what color do you like? Do you love this yellow? Do you have a bad reaction to the color yellow? Or what color do you find prettiest in the selection I showed you on the screen? And I will see you next time. I don't know what's coming next, if it's going to be a pattern or some tips. You never know with me, but if you love to crochet, please consider subscribing.